If you've been scrolling through endless VR headset specs, watching YouTubers compare pixel counts, and still feel like you might end up buying the wrong thing, this review is meant to clear that up. I've spent the last few weeks setting up the HTC Vive Pro I in a small apartment office, testing a mix of games, design tools, and training simulations, and I've kept an eye on the little details that usually get glossed over in the hype. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What I'll walk through isn't a laundry list of numbers, it's the real-world experience of putting this headset on, moving around, and deciding whether the premium price actually translates into something useful for you. First, let's talk about the initial friction. The Vive Pro I doesn't just sit in a box and work. You have to mount 2 base stations, run a tethered cable, and calibrate the eye tracking software before you can even launch a game. For someone who lives in a rented space with limited wall mounting options, that can feel like a deal breaker. On the other hand, the same setup gives you a room-scale experience that you simply can't get with standalone headsets. If you already own a PlayStation VR or an Oculus Quest and you're happy with couch-bound play, the extra hardware is probably more hassle than you need. But if your workflow involves precise eye movement data, say you're a UX researcher studying how users read virtual dashboards, or a developer building foveated rendering pipelines, those base stations become an essential part of the equation rather than a nuisance. One of the headline features is the precision eye tracking. In practice, the system does a solid job of detecting where you're looking and feeding that data back to compatible apps. I tried a medical training simulation that highlighted anatomy only in the exact spot of your gaze. The effect was immediate, and the visual fidelity in the focus area stayed crisp while peripheral details dropped a notch, exactly as the foveated rendering promises. This isn't just a gimmick, it reduces the GPU load enough that the headset stays smooth even during fast head turns in a high-intensity shooter like Half-Life: Alyx. If you're planning to develop or test applications that rely on eye tracking analytics, the data feels reliable enough for you to trust your findings. However, the eye tracking isn't a magic wand for every title. Most mainstream VR games simply ignore the data, so you won't notice a difference in a typical beat-em-up or puzzle experience. In those cases, the headset behaves like a high-end VR display with a 1440x1600 per eye resolution and a 90 Hz refresh rate. The visuals are genuinely immersive, textures stay sharp, and the field of view feels wide enough that you don't constantly feel boxed in. The top-tier visual fidelity claim holds up when you compare it side by side with a standard Quest 2. The colors are richer, the black levels deeper, and the overall sense of depth more convincing. Comfort is another area where the Vive Pro I tries to differentiate itself. The head strap is adjustable, the padding is slightly thicker than the original Vive, and the weight distribution feels balanced even after an hour of continuous use. I tested it during a 90-minute design sprint, alternating between CAD models and a virtual meeting room. I didn't feel the typical headache after VR that can happen with heavier headsets. That said, the cable, while a high-speed fiber link, still tugs a bit when you move quickly around the play space. If you're looking for an untethered experience, you'll have to accept that this system isn't designed for it. The cable also means you need to keep your play area fairly tidy, otherwise, you risk tripping or snagging the cord. Now, let's talk money. The Vive Pro I sits comfortably in the 5-figure range, which immediately puts it in the professional bucket. The value proposition comes from 2 angles. First, the eye tracking data can save you money on hardware upgrades because you can enable foveated rendering in supported apps, squeezing more frames out of the same GPU. Second, HTC includes a 2-month VivePort Infinity Pass, giving you unlimited access to a library of 700+ games and apps. For a developer who wants to experiment with many titles without buying each one, that pass is a decent offset. If you're a casual gamer who only wants to play the latest blockbusters, you might find better bang for your buck with a newer standalone headset that costs a fraction of the price. Who should buy it? If you are a professional, whether a game developer, a simulation trainer, a researcher collecting user eye movement data, or a designer who needs the highest visual fidelity for client presentations, this headset gives you tools that lower the barrier to collecting that data and delivering polished visuals. The built-in analytics also let you see how long users stay focused on certain UI elements, which can be priceless for iterative design. Conversely, if you're a hobbyist who just wants to dip a toe into VR, the upfront cost and extra hardware might feel excessive. You'd probably be better off with a Meta Quest 3 or a Valve Index if